delightful to be with you and to be able to share some things that I have learned. Excuse me, I do have a cold, as you can hear, so I'm very grateful for the microphone. Some things that I have learned about Mater, the behind-the-scenes story, the beyond Pauline Peredreau story. I understand that Sister Carney also had a presentation about Mater to you, so this will follow up on what she did. So Mater, old and new, and the artist, something about the artist herself, Pauline Peredreau, and a favorite Sacred Heart devotion. So the behind-the-scenes story really begins in the late 2nd century, a long time ago. There is what we call an apocryphal gospel, that is one that is not canonical, is not part of the New Testament, but there were other literary compositions that never got into the New Testament for a variety of reasons. And this is one of them. It's called the Infancy Gospel of James, or in Latin, the Proto-Evangelium, the early gospel. It's connected with James, with the figure of one of the apostles named James. But it's a historical novel, really, with incidents from the birth, the childhood, and the espousals of Mary. So the writer is probably setting down stories that were already circulating in religious devotion of people. And in it, Mary, this is where we get the names of Mary's parents, Joachim and Anna. That's not in the New Testament. It's in this piece of literature. And little Mary is presented in the temple at the age of 3. And she is then to be raised there, to grow up in the temple. This is probably modeled on the story of the child Samuel. This is a reading from 1 Samuel that we get in one of the Sunday liturgies. It's a beautiful reading, if you remember. The child Samuel is sleeping in the temple, and he hears a voice calling him, and he thinks it's the high priest, and he gets up and says, "Here I am, you called me," and the high priest says, "I didn't call you, go back to sleep." And the third time, the high priest recognizes that it's God who is calling him. "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." You remember that story? So this story of the child Samuel growing up, not in the Jerusalem temple yet, but in its precursor, the sanctuary in Shiloh. But from the 6th century, that's the 500s, in the East, in the Eastern Church, and from the 800s, the 9th century in the West, there is a feast of the presentation of Mary in the temple on November 21st, a very significant date. And there are representations of the presentation of Mary in the temple in art in a number of places. This one is a Cora monastery in Constantinople. And it's circular because it's a dome. This is a camera looking straight up at a dome that has the whole story there. And right center bottom, you have the figure of the high priest reaching out. All of these depictions, the high priest is reaching out, and little Mary is reaching out, and their hands almost meet. Here are 2 other examples of it, of the child Mary going up the steps, and the high priest reaches out to receive her. Here's another one from Milan that's very clear in the figures. And the parents are behind Mary, to the left, her parents. Now, part of this story also is that Mary receives colored threads, colored wool, to weave the curtain of the temple, the curtain of the Holy of Holies, with blue and purple and scarlet. And again, at Cora Monastery, this is the depiction of Mary receiving from the high priest the colored wool to do that weaving. Mary grows up, and it's time to get her married. she has to leave the temple now, and who is going to be worthy to marry Mary? And so the high priest assembles all of the suitable bachelors and has them bring a stick, a rod, and lay it down in the temple at night. They come back in the morning, and one of them has blossomed, and it is Joseph's rod. And that's why St. Joseph is so often depicted carrying a rod that has lilies blossoming from it. It's from this story. And the idea of little Mary in the temple is not brand new with the artist of Pauline Perdo, the artist of Mater. Here's one from the 17th century from Zurbarán, one of the Spanish artists, that already contains some of the elements of the Mater depiction. Mary is looking up rather than down, but she is pausing from reading, in this case reading, not weaving. She's pausing for a moment of prayer. And look what is to her right, our right too. Lilies and a basket. The basket contains some kind of cloth, not yarn. But those two elements are there, and the color pink in the draperies. So you see that Pauline Perdo is drawing on a tradition, an artistic tradition that is already there. Now, November 21st, the Feast of the Presentation in the Temple, that's the day that St. Madeleine Sophie and her first companions made their first consecration. And so it is considered the feast of the birth of the Society of the Sacred Heart. It is the day on which, we don't do this much anymore, but we used to, everybody renew their vows, and the temporary professed, which we called aspirants, would renew their vows on that day. So there's a strong connection with the society. Now, I'm wondering if any of you were in a Sacred Heart school at the time of a Little Mary procession. Maybe you're all too young. I don't know. I certainly was. November 21st, there would be a special celebration in the chapel in which the youngest student in the school processed up the aisle carrying a bouquet of flowers, and we sang this song. The little Virgin Mary, if I could sing it, was only 3 years old when to her tender mother this secret sweet she told, to go up to the temple and serve her God alone. This was her soul's desire, a secret she made known. And so they took their Mary upon this blessed day unto the holy temple where sacrifices lay. And then it goes on from there. Nobody here remembers that? No, you're all too young. Yeah. I was giving a similar presentation once at Villa Duchesne School in St. Louis, in which most of the people were another generation back from you, my generation. And somebody raised her hand and she said, I was a little Mary one time.
Dr. Adler was just reminding me, I think that has evolved a little bit. Like we were just looking at each other. At the Rosary, all the 3-year-olds process at Mater's feast and
Really?
And put a flower in before
At Mater's feast, not November 21st.
But it's at Mater's feast, so there's a little bit of difference, but they bring a flower to put before the tableau.
Okay, all the 3-year-olds. Yeah, see, that's commemoration of the same story, the same tradition. So the artist who painted Mater, of course, her name is Pauline Perdo, and there she is, at a much later date. She painted the first Mater in 1844, and she lived to 1895. And this is from much later, but she was at the, well, let me move. She was born in Angers in France in 1815, and she had one younger brother who became a priest, and he's going to come back into the story. Her mother, Anne Victoire Fouché, was a friend of Sophie, of St. Madeleine Sophie, and often made retreats with St. Madeleine Sophie, personal retreats. And at one point, much earlier on, before she married, thought that she had a vocation as a religious of the Sacred Heart, and St. Madeleine Sophie assured her she did not. That she had a vocation to marriage. But they remained in close relationship, as you will see. Now, Pauline she wasn't just starting out as an artist. She had already acquired a reputation, and she had done the official portrait of the Archbishop de Quélen, in Paris. And she officially entered the society in Paris in 1844, April 9th, 1844. Now, her mother had worked out this deal with St. Madeleine Sophie. She's entering, we called them postulants at that time, not candidates, but she should have stayed in Paris for about 6 months and then become a novice and done 2 years in Paris. Her mother convinced St. Madeleine Sophie to let her go to Rome to continue her art studies and to be able to go out, not to be cloistered, but to be able to go out and visit all the great museums and churches of Rome. This was very unusual. I mean, how she convinced St. Madeleine Sophie to do this is I don't know how, but she did. So Pauline goes to Rome. And you probably know the story of how the community met in the corridor, and there was this blank wall, and Pauline said, I would like to paint Mary there. And they were really skeptical about it. But she said, yeah, let me try. So it was in the summer of 1844, from June to July. She did this fresco painting, and I know nothing about fresco painting, but apparently it's pretty tricky. And some people are nodding yes. You have to paint on fresh plaster and do it quickly before the plaster dries, and then you have to wait for the colors to settle. She didn't have much experience at that, at fresco painting, but she had one advisor who helped her. And as you know, it took a while for the colors to settle. They had to put a curtain over it, and it wasn't, oh, it's so awful covered with a curtain. Sometimes you hear the story that way. That's not it. They knew they had to wait. And so they put the curtain over it, waiting for the colors to settle. And then when they finally opened it, of course, it was the Mater that we have. It was first called the Madonna of the Lily, La Madonna del Giglio, because of the obvious reason of the lily there. And you may have also heard the story that Pope Pius IX came to bless it and declared Mater Mirabilis, and therefore that was the name. That's oversimplified. Actually, the first person to call it the picture Mater Admirabilis was his mother, Macrina Mieczysławska, who was an abbess of the Basilian nuns from Minsk, Poland. And I should back up and say that Pauline left Rome in June of 1845, traveling with St. Madeleine Sophie and some others back to Paris, and she never went back. She never went back to Rome. It's a few months later, November of 1845, when Mother Macrina, who is a refugee, she's been, because of disputes between the Orthodox and the Latins, has been kicked out of her monastery. She needs a place to go. She's a friend of many cardinals and of the Pope, actually. And there are about 5 references in the house journal of the Trinità dei Monti to her. First of all, they were given half an hour to decide whether they would receive her. Cardinal asking, well, yes, of course they said yes. And they really seem to have enjoyed her presence. She had private quarters in the monastery at the Trinità, And sometimes she would host the whole community for recreation. And she got her Polish friends in Rome to bring flowers to the community. And there was a nice relationship. She stayed till 1869. Now, how did she come to call it Mater Admirabilis? Well, she liked to go in the evening to pray in front of the image of Mater by herself, alone. And she liked to use the litany of Mary in Latin. And Mater Admirabilis is one of the what do you call it, evocation. And she was praying it out loud, and when she got to Mater Admirabilis, she thought she heard another voice saying it with her. And she looked around, and there was no one there. And she took this to mean that that's what Mary wanted to be called in this image. And so the name stuck. Later, the next year, Pope Pius IX came to bless the image. What is it called? It's called Mater Admirabilis, and he blessed it in that name. And Mother Macrina was present when the Pope came, and they already knew each other. So she gets kind of pushed out of the story sometimes. So it's important to know that she was also part of this. So that's the corridor. Anybody been there? A handful of people. Yeah. So you recognize the corridor. Oh, it's too. Can we turn some of those lights out? I didn't. In the bookshelf. Yeah, there it is. Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. I didn't realize that because I wasn't looking at the screen. So you recognize the corridor, those of you who have been there, and the Mater painting is on the left there in that little opening. Mater doesn't really have that coloring. Yeah, the coloring is different, but you know what Mater looks like. So Pauline Perdo, as I'd said, she received a habit in Rome in 1845, and then she set out with St. Madeleine Sophie and never again returned to Rome and her Mater. There were two times. There was one occasion when the alumnae from the Trinita asked her to come back, and she did not get permission from the Superior General to do it. There was another time toward the end of her life when she did have the permission, and by that time she decided no, that she wouldn't. Pauline she must have been quite a character. One of her favorite sayings was, "God is all and the rest is nothing, but let's forget we're part of the nothing." For 20 years or so, she was the Mistress General of the Petit Pensionnat at the Rue de Varenne in Paris. The Petit Pensionnat is the junior boarding school. And she had 70 small children, girls, in this boarding school. And she was terrible as a teacher. She failed utterly as a teacher. But in dealing with people, especially with children, she was very good outside of the classroom. And she had this job for a long, long time. At the time when St. Madeleine Sophie was just on the other side of a green door in a fence, on the other side it was the mother house. And in the afternoons, and Pauline tells these stories, in the afternoons St. Madeleine Sophie would be finished with her correspondence for the day, and she would often say, "J'ai soif d'enfant," I'm thirsty for children. And she would send a word over to Pauline that she wanted to be with the children. The green door would open, Sophie would come out, often in a wheelchair, and they would have a wonderful meeting with the children. So she spent a lot of time there with St. Madeleine Sophie and gives us beautiful memoirs. But she continued to paint other Maters. And one of them, of course, is right here in the chapel. Here's one that is now in Malta. Now, all of these Mater paintings were done for houses in France. And as you may know, from 1903 to 1907, there were the expulsions. The whole society left France, 2,500 sisters, and dispersed to many, many parts of the world. So all of these, this says where the painting is now, not where it was intended for. And if you look at the collection, you really see subtle changes. It's exactly the same position. It's exactly the same symbol surrounding her, but there are changes. And the things to look for are what time of day in the back, the vase, the lily vase. Here it seems to be sort of transparent, but it isn't always. And particularly the basket. What's the color of the book? Is there a book at all? Is the yarn overflowing? And I don't know if you can see it, but here there's even a little ball that has fallen out over there. So there are subtle changes, and AMMG is Ad Majorem Maria Gloriam, to the greater honor of Mary, which she often put in these paintings, and this one is dated. Now, these two, you are familiar with one of them, and the book and the basket are very similar, but the time of day seems different. You know, it's much lighter in the Koto one. Now, you know the story of these. You know that Mother Aloysia Hardy commissioned these two paintings for Grand Coteau and St. Michael, her two favorite places in Louisiana. And St. Michael closed in the 1920s, and that's when that one came to St. Charles. The Grand Coteau one has always been where it started. Recently discovered at the Villa Lante, yes.
Where is that history?
Where is the history?
Where is it written? Because we'd love to have it for, the
Yeah.
course of the chapel.
Answer is I haven't found it yet. And I have looked in the two biographies of Aloysia Hardy. I have yet to look at the house journals of Koto and even St. Michael. That's a very good question. I'd like to know it too, but it's oral tradition.
Because that's important for us, for its historicity and its veracity as well.
Yeah. Recently found at the Villa Lante in Rome was this authentic Perdreau painting, which is now in the new museum of the Society at the Villa Lante, with, on the other side, some of the votive offerings. Those of you who have been to see Mater know that there's a whole collection of votive offerings there. It's customary in many religious traditions when you have received a favor to leave some kind of a memo. And they're almost always in the shape of hearts. Sometimes just a little plate or something, but mostly in the shape of hearts. And the people who put together the museum, I was actually one of them, selected some of the best ones and mounted them on this board, so that you would see next to the Mater, a real Pauline Perdreau Mater, you would see some of the offerings. This one is in Padova, and again you have the AMMG, if you can see that. But look at the vase now; it's kind of a bright blue, and the background, the water in the background is not as much. And there's a balcony in the back. Can you see that? It's a little metallic kind of balcony. And so it must have been done, and I don't have the record on where it originally was done for, but it must have been done in a place where they had a similar kind of balcony, and Mater is placed in their own school. This one is now in Torino. And the color of the book has changed. You see it's blue. The footstool is a different color. And it's either dawn or dusk. The light is much lower. Now, I understand you already have this picture of Mater in her old age. It was done, the brother comes back into the story. It was done for a book that he wanted to publish called Les Dernières Années de la Très Sainte Vierge, the last years of the Holy Virgin, Abbé Perdreau. And it's a collection of traditions about the last years of Mary, and it's often called In the House of St. John. Because of the tradition, first of all, the connection of the beloved disciple in the Gospel of John with St. John, which is a very old connection, and then a tradition that John moved to Ephesus in Asia Minor, and the line in the Gospel of John at the cross when Jesus says, behold your son, behold your mother. So it's all of those traditions put together to depict Mary in the house of John. And that's the title page, and it's dated 1883. I was rather surprised to find that because he's going to go on to write another one about the early years of the Virgin Mary, and I thought he would have done that first, but he didn't. He did the last years of Mary, and it's for that Pauline painted this image. We do not have the original. It is lost. It went to probably Sevilla in Spain. And we think it was lost during the Spanish Civil War. But we have a number of depictions of it, representations of it. And did Sister Carney go into detail about this one, about?
We just talked about how, just at the end, just looking at the schedule.
Yeah, okay, so there's more than that. And I've got 3 different depictions here because each one tells you something different. First of all, you assume that it's the same picture, right? Okay, look at this. The curtain. There's a curtain on the right side which has been drawn back on the middle one and the one on the right, and it's not there on the left. So she must have done at least 2 different versions of it. Now, it's clearest in the middle one, the room behind. And it contains a cross with the winding sheet over it, which is a symbol of passion and resurrection. And her lilies have been moved to the foot of the cross. Okay? You catch the symbolism of that? I mean, this is Mary being depicted when all of that has already happened. And so the lilies, which depict her youth, are not with her anymore. They're there. And then you see what looks like an altar. The Eucharist. So she has the memories of Jesus' passion, death, resurrection, now Jesus present in the Eucharist. Now, the one in the middle, however, doesn't show you some of the other things. The whole picture is actually the one on the right. Look behind her chair. Her distaff, she doesn't need it anymore. She's moved it. The basket, it's moved. It's not with her anymore. She has finished her weaving, and she's woven this whole long piece, and she's about to cut the yarn at the end. Okay? So her whole mission, her whole life, has been completed. And it's represented in all of these symbols. And she's looking up instead of down. Yeah. Okay? That was not the last one she painted, to my surprise. And Joseph Perdreau's second book is Les premières années de la Très Sainte Vierge, the first years of the Holy Virgin, and it's done in 1891. The other was 1883, so what, 8 years later, he goes back to look at the earlier life of Mary, and in that one only, you have the halo above. But this is the last one that Pauline painted, and it's now in Godeya, and it's dated 1891, and it is often called the Madonna of the Birds. The claim is that there are 5 birds in this picture. I can only find 4. And I have magnified it, I've done everything, and I cannot find more than 4. But we have 2 little birds here, perching on top of the basket. The yarn has overflowed, and we've got a little bird hanging on to some of the yarn here, and another one here looking up at her. The color of the vase is different again. We're back to a red book, but you have this big balustrade in the back. She's out on a terrace somewhere, and in the background you have what looks like a church or a fortress. So we're not in the 1st century anymore. We're in Pauline's time, and she is depicting Mater for the children in the school where she is, in Lyrac, in South France. And you see this little line of lights here? That's actually a train. She's put a train into the picture. So she's portraying Mater as present to the contemporaries who are there. She's our Mater. So beyond Pauline, of course, we have statues that also portray Mater. This is the one at Princeton, at the school in Princeton, New Jersey. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Very different. And some others at Villa de Motel in Houston. I don't know the story on how that one got there. But this lovely picture from Malta. And all we have this in the provincial archives in St. Louis, and we've been trying to find out what's the history on this. Nobody in Malta has ever seen it, but it's supposed to be from Malta. Maybe it was from some international society meeting. We don't know, but it's a lovely thing with boys and girls hugging Mater. These are stained glass from Atherton. They tend to be fairly standard in terms of the basket. Here you've got a very dark black book, actually. This one is the most intriguing to me. It's from Haiti, and it was designed, I'm told, by some artists in Miami at the Sacred Heart School at Carrollton, and it was for a school in Haiti. At first look, you say, well, that's not Mater. Oh, isn't it? Well, the distaff is there. The basket with the book is there. The lily is there. And this is Philippine over on the right side. Philippine has been incorporated now. And the weaving is, everybody's taking some part in the weaving of it. And I think it's intriguing. Pauline imagined Mary as a European and painted her that way, but Mary probably didn't look like this. She probably looked something like this, more. This is a young Egyptian woman from the 2nd century. We have in Egypt what are called mummy portraits. People who were wealthy enough, and this is the Roman period, who are wealthy enough to be mummified have their portrait painted way before they died. Sometimes it's the portrait that's on it is much younger than the corpse, you know. But they would have a mummy case and with a hole in it and put the painting in it so that you get these wonderful pictures of real people from this time. And I picked her out because I thought she's Eastern Mediterranean, you know, and probably of Greek heritage. But the real Mater probably looked more like this. But Pauline wanted to paint Mater in the image of people who would recognize her, those who could identify with her. So this is the concluding question for your own reflection. Who is Mater to you? And what would you want to say to her? What does she say to you? And I'm going to pass out now a little booklet. Give me one, too. I understand you've already seen the two pictures together. I saw a handout up there, but probably from Sister Connie. But this gives the two images together. Some of us perhaps can identify more with the younger Mater, and some of us perhaps more with the older Mater. And I think it's very good to have the two of them together, because it's the life cycle, you know. And on the other side is the prayer of Reverend Mother Marie-Thérèse de Lescure, who was one of the Superiors General in the 1940s. And she has this beautiful prayer that perhaps to conclude we can say together. And then afterwards we can have any kind of questions that you would like. And so let us pray together. Mother most admirable, guardian of the interior life, we ask you to loosen our grasp on visible things and help us to see the invisible, which your eyes behold, the invisible life, the invisible action, the invisible love, all those realities of faith that are for us eternal values. When we get lost in the devouring activity of the visible, and often not so important things, keep us in the light of the unseen, and make us strong as though we beheld the invisible, above and beyond accessory trifles that concern us and carry us away, that burden our minds and hearts and distort our scale of values. Give us, we ask you, a hunger and thirst for the essential, the wish of the Lord and the work of his love, to which he has called each one of us. Amen. Okay, so any comments or questions that you would like to raise? Yeah, Lynn.
What do you think the particular devotion was between Pauline and her brother, both
Mm-hmm.
Our Lady?
For people in the back, if you didn't hear, what you heard, okay.
It's kind of interesting that he's writing books about Mary's life, and
Yeah.
she's painting.
Yeah. Oh, I think they had a close relationship, certainly. Yeah. And why is it based on in Mary? You know, who got the first idea? I think hers was the first idea to paint the painting, because he doesn't write for a long time. And her painting perhaps was what inspired him. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are the books still available?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Are the books still available for purchase?
Those books? No. They're long out of print. We don't even have a copy. No, we have a copy of one of them. I think it's the second one in the provincial archives, but they have them at the general archives in Rome.